Hey guys.
Michael.
That's a sweet picture behind you.
Yeah, that is. I like that art, man. You know, like
Oh man, I'll tell my wife. She made it.
Really?
Is she not?
Yeah. She's upstairs trying to keep the kids from barging in the room. But
look, there's more than one piece.
Whoa!
That's super wild. Listen, Drivewire's kid friendly. If they give them front row center, you know.
I was gonna say I preemptively apologize if a 3-year-old comes like barging in CNN style. But
hey, if it can happen on news interviews on CNN, NBC, MSNBC, it can damn well happen on Drivewire Radio.
But if it's good enough for CNN.
Right. Yeah. So thank you so much for joining us today on Wednesday. You know, we always hate, you know, it's dinner time. You got a wife and kids. We really appreciate you, taking yourself away from that to be here with us.
No, guys, thanks for inviting me. Don't know why you want to speak to a boring person like me, but
come on,
I appreciate you breaking up the monotony of these days of being at home 24/7.
Well, we're glad that you can keep working for it. I'm certainly grateful that I can. What Drivewire is about is helping artists convert on their talent. Because, like, you can become talented, but then what now? So there's so much, like, it's only one small portion of what you actually need to do. So we're focusing in on people who are within the industry so we can unveil clues. And we do it through conversation with people like you. So what's your journey? How'd you get where you are? We'll start there.
That was the biggest question I had, man. Where did you start? How did you get here? Like, what a journey.
Man, you guys make it sound probably a lot more exciting than it is. I guess just to tell the people watching who the hell I am, I suppose. But yeah, like,
well, yeah,
Mike Raine.
Say, well, yeah, we know who you are. See, we're all listen to the radio show. We're just writing you in and like we're going to So you are
Mike Raine, senior editor for Canadian Musician magazine, among others. I guess technically he's senior editor for NWC, which is the publishing company of Canadian Musician magazine, as well as some related trade magazines like Professional Sound. Also co-host alongside my colleague Andrew King of the Canadian Musician podcast. Music industry conference moderator and panelist and do that kind of stuff too. YouTube. We're kind of all over the place, but essentially the MO for Canadian Musician, the magazine itself with my boss, our publisher, Jim Norris, goes back to 1979. So you can essentially think about it as I find the best way to describe it as a trade magazine for musicians. Most people that hear Canadian Musician, they think, it's a magazine about Canadian music, and it is and it isn't. You know what I mean? We're there not for music fans, but for musicians themselves and industry professionals, talking about, the craft of making music and, lessons in the craft of making music and recording that stuff. But also increasingly over the last, I'd say 5-6 years, especially, where we've been finding a niche is in the career of musicians, helping musicians navigate the very varied and very difficult.
Next, kind of deal.
Exactly, and how different things work. Like one of my things that I've written about a lot and had many conversations about for the podcast and such over the last few years is about rights and royalties and how that works.
We've had some discussions. I think one of the big ones we had was with Scott Middleton from Cancer Bats. He's a producer now, and he was kind of the one who brought up the rights. And actually, if I'm not mistaken, there's been a few other people. Apologies for those tuning in. Paul Sanderson.
We had a lawyer on from Toronto. He also talked about that, and it's huge.
Like people don't understand with the song, there's multiple layers of rights to actually owning it, producing it, publicizing it, and making money off it.
And it can be really needlessly complicated. Like the whole rights regime goes back like decades and decades to, the age of when print music was considered the main form of music distribution. And over the decades
this sheet of music is worth your whole house kind of deal.
Before we actually had records and that kind of stuff. And as the technology has evolved greatly over the years and the rights have been more complicated, they don't start from scratch every time. They kind of try to crowbar the new technology into the existing rights regime. And, part of it is that, because there's so many uses of music, there's so many different rights holders, whether you're talking master recording or composition, ownership, and that kind of stuff, there's some good reasons why it's as complicated as it is, but part of it's also 100%. That they, you know, keep trying to evolve it for new technologies based on an old regime.
Yeah.
So when you're trying to help artists developing their career, like this is something that's really kind of the genesis for this. When I went to a music school, I would ask people, what do you want to do after you graduate? And I got these answers that really were actually quite disheartening for me. Like, oh, I'm just going to, you know,
go back to Starbucks,
local record store, or go back to wherever I was from. And it was striking because these people who I was around are seriously talented, seriously talented. So I said, well, hold on, there has to be a level beyond talent and helping the career of the artist. Like, I think there's so many ways now to harness new and growing technologies like TikTok and like social, like Instagram.
SoundCloud's been one that people have just been sleeping on forever. So it's free. It's for you.
Yeah. There's distribution networks, right? And so what have you found? What kind of advice are you giving artists to helping their careers?
It's kind of crazy these days that this has always been to extent, you know, been the deal to an extent, but now more than ever is artists really have to be entrepreneurs at the same time. You know what I mean? They're the days of, and it still happens, but it's the rare exception, but like, you know, the time of all you really have to worry about is your art, and if you're great, someone will find you and they'll take care of everything, and you know,
that was the 80s true love story right there. You're performing at a bar, and there just happens to be a guy from Universal in the crowd that's like, those are going to be the guys. You know? That doesn't happen anymore.
And part of it's the fact that A&R itself has changed a lot. You know, record labels, for the most part, aren't developing bands as early in their development as they used to. It used to be a record label.
Kind of when they're not mid-peak, but they're on that fire. They have the torch lit and they're burning.
Yeah, exactly. As a couple A&R guys have put it to me in the past, it's, you know, it used to be that they find talent and then they create the spark. Now it's the labels want to see that you've already kind of got the fire going, and then they come in and throw gas on it. It's essentially the way they look at it. You know what I mean? They're not coming to...
You have the talent. Here's a bunch of money. Let's make it happen now.
Yeah. You know? And in the digital era, the good and the bad side to it is, in the digital era, the amount of data you have at your disposal, both you and the labels and such, kind of makes it inarguable whether people are paying attention or not. So in a way, it's not just, you know, it's not just about whether you're good and what they think they can do with that. They want to see that you're generating an audience of your own already.
And now, would you say that includes maybe social media presence with the interaction with fans, you know, talking to them, commenting back to them, driving that interaction? I know a big thing. Well, there's a big guy that is on the up right now. I'm following Token. You know, he was an underground rapper 2 years ago, and then, you know, over the last couple of years he started blowing up. But he's still, you know, reaching out to, you know, people that comment on stuff and saying, you know, thanks for the support, what up, you know, hope your mom's doing well, you know, things of that sense. Do you find that ends up driving that connection and success for those bands? Like that ends up showing that they are a band? And
yeah, absolutely. You know, and as the social media experts always say, it has to be true to you and your personality. You know what I mean? You can't put it on and be fake about it, because then that comes across pretty easily. But yeah, in terms of like what the A&Rs are looking at, they're looking at the YouTube streams and the Spotify streams and, you know, those kinds of numbers, but they're also very much looking at your social media numbers, but also the engagement. You know, more and more engagement on social media is more important than the actual numbers themselves, especially if the fans are taking initiative to help spread the word about you. Because, you know, that's gold to the label. You know, if you can get your fans doing the marketing for you and them, then that's brilliant.
Carter's telling Stacy's telling Dom, Tom's telling Fran. It's just a band that I knew, and now 7 people know about it. So.
Yeah.
If they're doing covers, if they're trying to spread the word about you, you know, that's going to get labels' attention and that kind of stuff. One of the upsides to the fact that by the time a up-and-coming, buzzed-about artist is signing to a label and they kind of have that, you know, that buzz happening and they have that, they have that engagement happening, is it does give them more leverage when it comes time to sign a contract. You know, in the days when they're signing a band that has nothing going on except their talent, and they're really taking a bigger risk on them, all the negotiating leverage and contracts was on the side of the label. And, contracts, especially with those majors. Yeah, you can get a much better deal.
Yeah, would you say that's because it's like, not that they're not any good, but would you say that's because maybe nobody showed interest in them, so they have more leverage and they can get you down with a better deal? Or like how, not that they're saying they're not as good.
I think what he's saying is that if you get yourself to a position where you have a lot of engagement already, you actually have a little bit less need for the label itself. So
because you have so much momentum.
Yeah, because you're already going somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's more likely more labels are showing, or at least, more labels, more publishers, more managers, more agents. All those people essentially come knocking when you get some buzz going and saying, hey, we want to work with you. And they all bring something to the table. I don't mean to make it sound like they're leeches or anything, because, that's not the case with the good ones. They're all bringing needed services to the artist's career.
Publishing, getting articles, getting interviews, getting shows, in the places that maybe you couldn't reach before, those people that you couldn't have access to. They're important. They're important.
And they come in, when it works best is when they come into the fold once it's kind of happening already and it's reaching the point where the artists can't handle it themselves, or they're starting to feel overwhelmed by having to handle the business side of things rather than the music. That's when you really want to start bringing people on board.
Almost like they don't have a complete team behind them, where they are now at the point where they need that team to keep them going and forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And and beyond labels and that, there's so many great digital distributors out there that are handling a lot of the stuff labels traditionally did. And things like CD Baby or DistroKid and that kind of stuff that are doing a lot of DistroKid.
What did you say? CD Baby?
Yeah.
Just for the more layman, for the more layman listener, can you go ahead and explain what CD Baby is?
That sounds like a 90s soft punk Vanilla Ice band.
And as the name would suggest, they started an era of CDs, but they're now one of the best. I don't want to give free promotion to anyone ever, but they are one of the best distributors out there. Yeah,
They get you onto iTunes and other places where you can go.
Yeah, and if you're not part of a label who's sending your music to the Spotifys and iTunes and that kind of stuff, like Spotify, for instance, had a pilot project where they're allowing fully independent artists to upload their stuff, but that's no longer the case. They kind of ended that. So if you're an independent artist who doesn't have a label doing that distribution and stuff for you, you do need to sign up with a distributor, such as one of which is CD Baby. And and you upload their catalog. They'll distribute it to all the digital services for you, as well as provide, give you the dashboard and info in terms of royalties, where your music's being used. They also have a sync licensing and publishing arm, I believe, as well. So they can handle a lot of stuff for you. They're not the only ones. There's a bunch out there. Do your research and figure out what's best for you. But they're one of the big ones. That's just an easy name drop for when you're talking about distributors. But and from what I've heard, they do a good job of it.
I have a question. So you were talking about like artists having a little bit of momentum before a band really gets noticed, or before they have the leverage and they start to actually generate, again, the movement forward that is being looked on as an investment opportunity by labels. That's how this game works. Mm-hmm. Have you seen, as the senior editor, particular ways that bands can actually generate the kind of excitement that gets word of mouth going to get noticed? Like, have you seen anything where you're like, oh, yeah, that would definitely do that? Anything like that?
Besides from writing your band name on a dildo and just sharing it. That guarantee blows up, that guarantee shares, but is it a good poke?
Yeah. There's so many things that it has to be true to what the band's, the music and the style and the personality of the band. 'Cause, there's no one size fits all thing. The cliche is it all starts with great music, and I know some cliches are cliches for a reason. It's true. Like, your music does have to be ultimately the thing that gets people coming back. Because it's a lot easier to get a first impression than it is to get a second impression if the music sucks. You know what I mean?
True.
If people come check you out because you had a cool, a cool social media presence or cool merch or, a viral video or whatever it was, they may come check you out if the music's not good, or at least if it's not their thing, they're not going to come back.
If it doesn't hold me, then I'm not going to stick around. I might not, I might be like, these guys were funny and cool, but am I going to stick around for the music?
Yeah. So ultimately it means getting in communities and becoming part of communities that can be, local scenes, in the traditional sense, or it can be, on SoundCloud or whatever it is. I'm probably not the best person to give advice on, having done it myself, you know what I mean? Reach out to bands. I guess probably the best advice I'd have in that regard is find bands that have generated that buzz, or no, I shouldn't say bands, any artist, whatever genre it is. But, find someone that you like, is within the same, ballpark as what you do, and is kind of a few steps ahead of where you want to be within the same area of the industry, or, the music scene as you want to be, and approach them and ask them what they did and how they did it.
Just kind of almost as simple as just asking them how they got there. Like it's not a trade secret. Like they want to help you. They should want to help you.
Most artists want to help each other, and they're really receptive, and especially in those early stages of their career, before, before things get really controlled with publicists and that kind of stuff, and they are more accessible. Most people are good people, and they want to help other people like them. Know what I mean? So I think the best advice would be to find someone that is a few steps ahead of where you want to be, and just approach them and ask how they did it, and get some pointers that way.
Everybody likes to talk about themselves.
Very true.
That's the damn truth. Like
I personally don't. I like to talk about others. I'm just gonna get in there and say I don't like to talk about myself.
Right.
I'll drop it if you ask.
Right. I have that on recording. This guy saying that. Okay.
I'll post that the day
I have that on recording.
I have to say, this is weird for me, being the one having to think on my feet and ask the questions. I'm much more used to being in your guys' position, being the one asking the questions and controlling the conversation. That's a lot more comfortable for me.
Listen, we have your best intentions in mind, and you've actually been delivering really good
quality answers, man.
Thanks, man.
I've been following some people as far as generating an online presence, because it is something that interests me a lot. And being a senior editor yourself, if an artist, because a lot of artists that I know, a lot of them, I follow them. Their posts on Facebook are eloquent.
Facebook,
they're written well. They're communicators. These people.
Even the colors of presentation.
Would it be intelligent to write about a topic and send your written works to blogs like yours to see if it gets published for attention? Is that smart? Is that off the mark? Would that take forever to get notoriety?
Does it give a bad imagery? Does it give a possibly good imagery from reaching out, wanting to get that exposure?
Are you talking for aspiring journalists and that kind of stuff, or?
Some like us, maybe Drivewire, just a crazy. Maybe some like us, Drivewire Radio, where we're we want, we want to reach out to the people. Say we want to promote the artists, we want to help get exposure to people, connect, venues or producers and bands, or business owners.
Well, and on top of that, not to make it confusing, along the lines of artists being entrepreneurs.
Yeah, artists getting out there.
Yeah.
If you have a product, you got to get attention.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a viable way?
Yeah, what I would say though is, you be your own publicist. Before you have a publicist, before you have the need for a publicist, you have to be your own publicist. The same way I was talking about, you have to be your own everything these days, initially at least. And so that's going to involve sending out your music to media. And part of the shitty reality these days is there is less music media than there used to be, and what music media there is much more fragmented and whatnot. So that said, you do have to be your own publicist, and part of that is sending out your music and pitches to media of all kinds. What I'd say is you're probably going to have a lot more success sending research targeted pitches to fewer media outlets than just kind of sending a mass email to 500
so
people.
Almost
you know what I mean?
Almost write up the most formal, perfect kind of introduction, but don't send it to mass. Send it to a few select people that you're these are the people that are worth it. These are the people that maybe will give us a chance, and then target it almost.
How would you target it?
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be It doesn't have to read like a job cover letter. Know what I mean? Like, it can have personality. It should have personality.
The band you want, but you didn't know you needed.
Yeah, please have personality.
And do avoid the this band sounds like Led Zeppelin had a baby with Soundgarden and then got remixed by Noah Forty Shabib or whatever it is. Know what I mean? That like artist meets artist, and now you have me. That
Be
kind
your
of
own original kind
thing.
of true sound. Let them decide what you sound like.
Yeah, don't do that. And you can. It's all contradictory, I guess. What I'm saying, but you should give some idea of what you sound like. Just avoid the cliches, I guess. But back to my main point in terms of like, do your research and have it be targeted. One of the things I often get is someone being like, people coming to us, and it's just clear they don't know what Canadian musician is, to be honest, because they're coming to us saying, hey, we just released this, would love for you to give it a review. And for one, it just shows they don't really know what we are. They don't know we're a magazine for musicians, the industry, not music fans, that we don't do album reviews and concert reviews and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, we're not going to tell people what we think of this album. We're here to help people, not review it.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, actually get to know, spend a few hours, or maybe, frankly, it probably only takes an hour or less, to be honest.
Cruise the damn website.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, look at social media.
Get an actual idea of what kind of stuff, what they cover and what kind of stuff they write about and how they approach it, and tailor your pitch to what they want. The best pitch for any editor of any kind is one that makes their job easy. You know what I mean? And so yeah,
amen to that in almost every job.
Include a link to the music, obviously. Include high-res photos, because if they do something with you, they're going to want high-res photos.
Hot little tip. That's a nice. I like that. That's a good. Some people might not know that. They're like, dude, if we send this almost explicit photo, be like, hey, send the photo because that gets you noticed.
That's the thing, man. Like,
is that a titty out on your photo album? What?
And tell them what's interesting. And tell them what's interesting about you. You know what I mean? The fact that you release an album, I'm sorry to say, but the real truth is the fact that you release music is not interesting or news.
A lot of people releasing music. A lot of music in the world.
A shit ton of music gets released every week, and the fact that you just release something is not noteworthy, no matter, unless you're huge or whatever. So tell them what's interesting about you. Tell them what's interesting about the music. Tell them what's interesting about you. If you did work with someone, if the producer you worked with is notable, or you had a guest, a guest artist on the album who's notable and that kind of stuff, do mention that, because it kind of just adds to the credibility of you and the project and that kind of stuff too. If you've had past media, and don't be afraid, start with some low-level media if you have to, because kind of every link, every clip you get or whatever it is, kind of adds to the credibility of who you are and shows, hey, this person showed us some attention, and makes it more reason you should show us from it.
Really quickly about the local media thing, because we both come from a small town, Chatham, less than 100,000 people in the entire district, whatever. But even just being focused on by those newspapers, or like, the city TV channel we have, that is, even if it's 200 people reading it or 50 people watching it, it's still exposure. It's still people that might end up checking out your music, still might listen to one song. One song's better than no songs. Two songs, maybe not the whole album, but you're still exposing yourself to those people.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So like everything helps, especially early on. But yeah, I'd say in terms of doing the job of being your own publicist, my biggest advice is tailor your pitches to who you're reaching out to, and it's better to reach out to 10 or 15 people with targeted pitches than 150 with a mass email.
I have a question for you. I'm not sure if you have an opinion on this or not. What do you feel? What are your feelings on like college campus radio exposure? Because there's there's a million college campuses out there. There's a lot of radio stations.
Absolutely.
Do you find those good opportunities, interviews, performances?
Oh, for sure, man. College radio can be really influential within the community. College radio has a huge history of being very influential and being trend-setting and being on top of our cool new artists and stuff like that, well ahead of mainstream radio. So yeah, absolutely, every play, and they pay SoCan royalties, by the way, so that helps. By the way, if you're a songwriter, even if you've never had any, not had one stream or had one song on the radio yet, sign up for SOCAN. Like if you're actually even in a half professional way, have any intentions of being serious about your music, the first thing you should do is sign up with SOCAN.
Free money from the government to make music.
I've heard from like Mike McCarty and people at SOCAN many times that stories about artists kind of unexpectedly blowing up who hadn't signed up with them, and then they're having to go be like, SOCAN's receiving the stream logs and the radio logs and be like, who the hell's this? Why are they getting plays and they're not in our database? And
Charlie Ray Jepsen. Who is this? We can't figure out what this is.
Just to backtrack to some, what we were talking about earlier. First step, sign up with SOCAN if you're a songwriter.
SOCAN.
Just to make sure that, these are the things that people inside the industry, I know what SOCAN is, but a lot of people,
what is SOCAN? We gotta go through this every time. A lot of people might not know.
Michael, do you know how many idiot guitarists have told me that they write songs better without theory? So it's not true, and my job is to show people the simple insider tricks and knowing about SOCAN. So can you just tell the team what is SOCAN?
What is that?
It is Canada's. People may have heard, even if they don't know what they are, they may have heard of ASCAP or BMI, which is the equivalent in the States. So what they are performing rights organizations. The succinct way of putting it is they collect the data from anywhere where music is performed publicly, whether that's radio, streaming services, in businesses that are playing music, in the store or whatever it is, pretty much anywhere.
Really? That one I actually didn't know. Even internal store streams, like if I go to HMV and they're playing my song,
I know many people, I know many stores will just plug in someone's iPhone and put on Spotify and that. But technically, that's actually illegal. Technically, they do need to be licensed by. Oh man, I keep saying stuff, Nick. Actually, I need to add this, and it makes it all needlessly complicated.
Anytime as an artist, specifically as a songwriter, the creator of the music, anytime your music is played in public, you are owed money. You are owed money for that.
So essentially, SOCAN collects the data.
And ASCAP and BMI in the States, they do the same thing. Mm-hmm. And if you're creating, again, I love the way you said it. If you're creating even semi-professional, do you know how many songs have blown up? And I'm like, the quality on this is garbage, but the song is taking off.
Yeah.
And so if that happens to you as an artist, you want to be in position to immediately start receiving your royalties instead of having to backtrack and find out what you're owed and get it then. It's easy.
And what SOCAN's in charge of is the compositions. So the actual song composition itself, not the sound recording per se, which is owned by the labels, typically. So someone even performs. Yeah, so if someone covers your song or even performs your song live, as a songwriter, you get money for that. And actually, one of the best.
Yeah, love this, man. And I want to clarify. I'm going to let you keep going. There's the royalty of who wrote the song, and then there's the royalty on the specific recording itself. There's a dual royalty on every recording of the songwriter. Mm-hmm. And so if Carter Niffen sings a Beatles song, there's going to be a recording rights on the record, and there's going to be a songwriter's royalty for the Beatles, Forever and Ever, Amen, and that's how it's done.
Yeah.
Thank you. Keep going, please.
As you can tell, he had some passion. There was some passion. There was a fire in his chest about
know.
People don't know, man. We've talked about it at least 4 or 5 times, and even I still don't know,
And actually, here's one of the important things that... one of the important things about signing up for SOCAN for Canadian songwriters, and for whatever reason, it tends to be one of the less known or less understood things of what SOCAN does and pays out for, but it's actually usually, for most artists, the first kind of royalty they generate for themselves, which is live performance royalties. So say you play a show with there are some criteria that a show needs to meet. I think there has to be a ticket or cover charge for the show of, I think, $6 or $7, something like that.
So a minimum right?
Yeah, and the venue has to be licensed with SOCAN.
Minimum venue capacity by any chance?
I don't believe so, no.
Okay, cool. That's good for bars, small bars.
Little 50 person capacity places, as long as they're licensed by SOCAN. So maybe ask any place that regularly hosts live music should be licensed with SOCAN, but maybe doesn't hurt to ask.
True.
But if the place is licensed by SOCAN and it meets some pretty low bar of minimum criteria, you will get live performance royalties from SOCAN after the fact for the performance of those songs that you performed, assuming they were your own original songs. If you perform covers and you still meet that low bar, then the writers of the songs you covered will actually get SOCAN money from SOCAN for your performance. But if you're performing originals,
you might not get.
And those live performance royalties can be the first real money in terms of royalties that artists often get, even before streaming and radio and that kind of stuff. So, and I know and again, I know the folks at SOCAN often find it very frustrating how many artists don't bother submitting their set list to them. Because maybe that's why artists actually have to go after the fact and submit their set list and put in that 10 minutes of work to submit.
There's that little extra bit of work to get that free money, man. I don't know how much work is worth free money. Too much work, but it sounds.
I have a saying in my life.
The awesome part about live performance royalties is there's actually a minimum that they pay out. So I think SOCAN will actually pay out. Double check this. I wrote an article on it a couple of years ago. You can find it at musician.com/features. Go find it there. But if I'm remembering, if I'm remembering correctly, SOCAN will pay out a minimum live performance royalty, and I think it's the greater of either a minimum of $75 they pay you, or it's a certain percentage of the ticket or cover sales, something like that.
Wow. That's awesome.
So it actually can turn into something like, if you're playing shows often, it can actually turn into some pretty decent money pretty quickly.
That's huge money right there. You play 10 shows a month, you got $7,500, man. $750, not $7,500.
Even if it's small, like when you're in the gym, if you lift the small weights like big weights, by the time your muscles get there, you're gonna not do damage to your body because you'll be lifting them properly. So I always say to myself, lift the small weights like big weights.
Big ones.
Sign up for all of these places now. So by the time you make it, like if you believe in yourself, you're going to make it. Well, sign up now so that you can be rewarded when it happens.
Yeah, absolutely. And also go sign up with the kind of the other side of the whole performing rights equation is, so like I said, SOCAN takes care of the composition, the actual writing of the song, effectively, the sheet music, you could think of it. And whereas the other side of that is the recording itself. If you're a totally independent artist, go sign up with Resound or one of its sister organizations that essentially handles that side of things. So you're getting paid for that side of things too if you own your master recordings and that kind of stuff as an independent artist.
Right on. Right on, man. Honestly, you've given us a lot of information. I went into this just wanted to talk about how you got to where you are. I don't even know that I got that. Where were the couple of years that you went from school to see the information we got in between?
I feel like I never answered your very first question of like how did I come to the magazine and that kind of stuff. Anyways, it's probably not that interesting, but it was really happenstance, I guess you could say.
Man, it was perfect. It was exactly a lot of information.
Knew a person who knew a person.
Honestly, it was. If you want the whole story, like I went into.
You're holding it back, and I want it.
It's not that interesting. I did a 4-year degree at Carleton University in political science and human rights. That was and still things I'm passionate about and very interested in, very avid news consumer and all that kind of stuff. My intention was to do the noble thing and go into like the, human rights focused, like NGO nonprofit sector. Like so many people around my age graduated in like 2008 or 9, right as the recession was like hitting.
Right as the crash happened.
Yeah. And all the NGO sector was slashing budgets and contracts and that. And I was like, why not have, so I had the brilliant idea of going from, one suffering industry to another. And I was like, I'll go into journalism. And So I went back
which definitely isn't a suffering industry at all. I'm a radio guy. I work side by side with journalism. They're not suffering industries whatsoever.
Well, I had the double dumb idea of going into like print focused or printed web focused journalism rather than broadcast.
Those aren't dying.
Man, should have gone into broadcast. And funny enough, like part of the story is like when I went to like the print and web journalism program, did like the 2-year post-grad one at Humber College.
Right on.
And it was in that, and kind of the happenstance part. I didn't go into that program intending to go into music journalism, even though I'm a useless musician, no sense of rhythm, but always had a huge love of music and music history and all that kind of stuff. And when I went to in university, a little bit of like writing for a Montreal-based music blog and stuff like that, but like had no intention, it didn't occur to me that music journalism was even a thing.
It wasn't a long-term plan in your mind.
No.
It was just like, this is where I'm at.
Yeah. And anyways, long story short, the happenstance part of it is while I was in that program, was in Montreal visiting my brother when he lived there at the time, happened to meet Anna at a party, really. I happened to meet Anna Asimakopoulos, who at the time was the arts reporter for CBC Television in Montreal. Spent most of the night like talking music and journalism and stuff with her. She was like, "Yeah, you want to come be my intern this summer?" And when someone says that at like 1 a.m. after a bunch of drinks, you kind of take it with a grain of salt. But amazingly, she actually was like, true to her word and emailed me, like, "Hey, so are you coming? Do you want to be my intern this summer?" Did that, did some arts reporting as part of that for a summer in Montreal, which was awesome. But because I was in the print stream in journalism school, I still needed to do a print-focused internship as well, and was literally just like, well, if I'm going to go work for free, I may as well enjoy it. So I literally just Googled Canadian music magazines, and Canadian Musicians, one of the ones that came up.
Right.
Emailed Andrew, now my colleague, blah, 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 here's who I am. If you take interns, would love to, come. Did internship there. That was great. Did some writing for them. There was about a year in between where I did some other random stuff, like blogging for Huffington Post.
I did
like a 6-month contract with like. I did like a 6-month contract as an assistant editor for like this small publishing company that did like automotive industry trade magazines, and I know.
You got to write about mufflers. Write about
absolutely
bands,
nothing, and care even less about cars. Like I know nothing about it. So anyways, did that kind of stuff, and really just a number of years ago now, it feels like, got a call out of the blue from Andrew, being like, "Hey, our assistant editor left, we need to replace him pretty quickly. What's your job situation?" And that's how I joined the company, and have been there ever since. And
you've been happy, man. That's awesome.
Yeah. So in that time, I always loved music, but in this job, I've become very fascinated by and interested in how the music industry itself operates. And that's kind of become my niche within the company, is kind of that industry business side of how this all works. Yeah.
Well, dude,
that's awesome, man. That's fucking awesome. Excuse my language for all the people.
You're self-deprecating, but that was a good story. Like that was
excellent.
That was a good story.
I'd read that in a short novel.
Honestly, I'm not buying the novel.
He published it. It's a good story. I really love that, because it's like you saw the opportunities as they were there. You just said, I'll take them, just to kind of get me by to see another opportunity came. And an opportunity came in that time at the end of that other opportunity. You're like, this is exactly what I wanted.
I've also heard that 1:30 in the morning is a good time for a lot of stuff.
Very
1:30 is a good time in the morning.
So yeah, I would just not everything, but some of the stuff I've written, particularly the industry focused stuff. I mentioned CanadianMusician.com/features. That's where we share some of the long form stuff, especially the career oriented stuff from past issues of the magazine. We've been posting stuff there the last 2 or 3 years, and some of the things I've mentioned that I've alluded to, that I've written about in the last few years, particularly to do with rights and royalties and that kind of stuff, you can find there. And it probably explains it better than I've said it off the top of my head.
You said it good, man.
I respect that you were able to switch sides from always asking the questions to being asked the questions, because it's
a hard switch.
It is a completely different side. You are like over there like, fuck, I hope these guys aren't putting me on the spot for anything crazy. So you're always nervous and anticipating, and you're not like, so hopefully it was easy going for you. We always try and make
you guys treated me nicely.
Now we need to be interviewed by you next time.
That'd be awesome.
All right, we can do that.
I'm kidding.
I'm not.
It's funny. Like I remember, thinking back to journalism school. I remember the part that's like the most uncomfortable when you're in journalism school is doing interviews, conducting interviews, because it is a pretty unnatural thing at first, being in that position of just like I'm just going to ask you.
It feels like. Putting
and now it's by far my favorite part of the job. And it's part of the reason why I love the podcast even more than anything else we do, because it just gives me an excuse to have these kind of long-form, free-flowing conversations every week with people.
So would you like to come to my house, have a cup of coffee, and chat for 2 hours about your career?
And the great thing about the podcast is it's just kind of, it gives you so much more leeway to just have whatever conversation you think is interesting or timely. And there's no constraints on it.
It's a podcast. That's
I also am really grateful in podcast form that there's not like, it doesn't get to this sort of, let's call it the climax, and then let's go ahead and hear this message from Ty. Like I can just talk to you and pick your brain and learn things. And like I personally love people so much that when I get into something like this, I'm like, I love your story. Like I'm hearing it all. And I really like it, man.
So,
and it's a lot of times people don't think it's worth talking about, but it is. Like you have a lot of knowledge that artists, I think, suffer because they don't know.
Yeah, totally.
And I wish it was different.
Absolutely, and I do have to say, when I talk to older folks in the industry who've been around for multiple generations artists, they often do give credit to the younger artists these days for being much better educated on things and having much better control of their careers than artists of generations past. So I do think part of that's just through necessity, part of it's through just the information's more accessible and that kind of stuff. There's also just a lot more out there in terms of educational programs and panels and webinars and such for artists. Like there's a lot of learning resources out there for artists if you search for them and put in the time.
University of Google, man.
More than ever before.
Free access for everybody.
Yeah. Last self-promotional shameless plug is, go subscribe to Canadian Musician Podcast, because we do have, it's all about conversations that are useful and interesting to artists and folks interested in the music industry and how it works behind the scenes and people's experiences. So yeah. That's my last. That's my last shameless plug.
I love that, man. I love that. And
check them out, people.
I'm probably gonna subscribe myself, and I'm gonna I hope it's okay with you. But when we see things on other blogs that we love to share it, give credit to it. Like, yo, check this out. Totally. So every guest that we have, we follow, we attend to. I would love to learn from your blog, and I would love to shout out your blog whenever we see something. We're like, yeah, we vibe with that. Does that go with you?
Absolutely, man. Absolutely.
Awesome,
I appreciate it all.
Thank you so much for coming on. I got a lot out of this. I hope a lot of our guests will too. We'll send you the clips, anything we cut up, just to make sure we're cutting it up in your favor and not against you.
Cheers, man. Do whatever you want with it. But yeah,
where's home for you? Where are you based?
Burlington.
Dude, as soon as all this is over, let's get together.
Absolutely.
Let's meet.
Or even just as friends, man. We'll drink a beer or something like that together, and we'll have fun.
Man, how do I miss just being able to shoot the shit over a beer at a bar? That's miss those days.
Time.
You'll return
man.
soon.
You communicate with us, and we'll make it happen. All right.
Absolutely, man. Guys, thanks for having me on. This has been a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Made it easy for me.
Like it was for us. Have a good one, okay, brother?
Right. Cheers, guys. Thank you.
Bye-bye.